Papua New Guinea. The local tribesmen gathered to start a ritual that they hoped and prayed would return the favor of the spirits of their ancestors. It's a ritual they had seen performed many times over the previous 3 years. It started when the strangers showed up on their shores. These strangers in green prepared the ground to sanctify it. First, by leveling a section of the jungle, grinding down the stumps, flattening the ground, preparing it so it is just holy and perfect. They laid down sheets of steel on that ground, and then they erected what the natives could only surmise were temples, massive huts, larger than any family could ever need. And finally, they took the trunks of those trees and built altars high in the sky so they could be closer to the spirits as they entreated them. Once the preparations were done, these strange men put what appeared to be coconuts over their heads. Another grabbed some bright colors, climbed up onto the altar so the spirits could see them clearly, and started a ritual dance while the man with the coconuts sang into the sacred stick. The ritual worked because the spirits rewarded them with these magnificent birds never before seen in this part of the world. They came in for a landing, and their wings never moved. And out of these birds, a bounty like they had never seen. Food enough to feed the village for years to come. Wonderful green beasts with these strange round legs that rolled more than walked, and they could carry heavy loads forever. Wonders that they couldn't believe. And those native tribesmen that helped these strangers were gifted themselves, and the tribe flourished. Clearly, the shaman said, this is a sign that we are favored by our ancestors. And this went on until one day, the birds landed as they had been doing for 3 years. But this time, things were different. The men loaded their beasts of burdens on the birds. They entered them themselves. The birds took off, never to return. The tribesmen realized that they must have fallen out of favor with the spirits of their ancestors, so they began their own. First, they took a new section of jungle, leveled the trees. Since they didn't have steel, they took bamboo mats and rolled them out so these birds would have a place to land. They built a hut just like they had seen, as well as erected the altars. And then one of the natives put coconuts over his head, took a sanctified stick, and started singing in it, while another climbed up onto the altar and took the flags and danced the dance to attract the birds. The birds didn't come. Now, I don't tell you this story, which is, by the way, true, to make fun of the tribesmen in Papua New Guinea. In fact, I feel sad. I tell you this to illustrate a modern-day business problem that this represents. You see, throughout the country today, there are people in business who are going through the motions, and they have the same problem these tribesmen had. See, these tribesmen didn't have the big picture. They didn't understand what those activities represented and how it connected to what their outcomes they were looking for. And so they went through the motions. And today the same thing happens. People are doing things because we've always done it that way. It's the way I was shown. And the results are frankly the same. Now, this is a problem I actually first encountered after I got out of the Navy when I was vice president of operations at a telecommunications company called Communications Plus. And we provided telecom services to businesses, serviced their equipment, etc. And I remember one day, I just got so frustrated. I was looking at the work orders from the previous day, and I'm like pulling my hair out, By the way, you could see that this was a true story. And I'm just thinking to myself, why are my customer service reps doing this? You see, customers were calling in with a problem that was user error. Their phones weren't ringing because they had put them in Do Not Disturb. It's a simple press of a button to fix it. But my reps were scheduling a technician for the following week who went out there, pressed a button, and now I can't charge for their service. I mean, who's going to pay for that? It's ridiculous. There was another problem I also uncovered. But the first, they didn't understand how their actions and what the results, intended results needed to be. Now, this has been studied by researchers at Harvard University. Does understanding the results of your action actually affect the quality of your work? And what they did is they took hundreds of participants and they gave them images to identify. Now, half the participants, that's all they were told. Please write down what you see in this image and identify it for us. The other half, they were told the results of this will be used to diagnose disease. The difference was astounding. Same work, same number of hours. Those people who knew why they were doing it had 25% more accuracy. Think about that. That was the problem with my customer service reps. They didn't understand the purpose of technicians were to generate revenue. But there was another problem. I said there was a second problem. The second problem was they also didn't understand my intention as VP of Operations. My goal was to get every customer serviced as quickly as possible. This was a problem that could have been solved on the phone. How much faster than that? Instead, we had to send a technician out a week later because that's how long the scheduling was. And somebody had to put up with this for a week. But wait, that's not the only problem. That technician could have been servicing a more complex issue that is now delayed additional time because they're spending their time on this little piddly issue. In the military, we call that commander's intent. And commander's intent is what allows an officer to exceed or change their orders when it no longer will accomplish the goal. I'll give you a perfect example from the Civil War. 1862, General Samuel Curtis is ordered to protect the Union assets of Missouri from the Confederate forces coming up from Arkansas. The Confederacy wanted to annex Missouri. The Confederates were under the command of General Sterling Price. Well, Price's soldiers attacked, Curtis's soldiers defended successfully, and now we're chasing them out of Missouri, and they got to the state line. Mission accomplished, right? But Curtis knew his commander's intent was to eliminate the threat of the Confederate forces. If he had stopped at the state line, they would have regrouped, turned around, come back, and he'd have had to fight that battle all over again. So he exceeded his orders, went into Arkansas under his own authority, and harried the troops until they were no longer a threat. And for this, he was lauded and awarded. That's the value of commander's intent. And so when you want to present the big picture to your team so they know what to do, it's not enough to connect them with how their activities affect others. You also need to connect them with what your intention for doing this is. Let me show you what this looks like today in a very successful company, one you may have heard of. How many people do business with Zappos shoes? Okay, for those of you with your hands aren't up, Zappos now is owned by Amazon, but they were one of the first online shoe stores. And they were started by a gentleman named Tony Hsieh. Tony didn't invest any money in traditional marketing. His marketing was through word of mouth, which meant he needed to keep happy customers and have them spread the word. In order to ensure this, their policy, even to this day, is that every single employee at Zappos goes through the same 6-week customer service training that their customer service reps go through. In addition, they are required to spend 40 hours a year on the phone with customers. Think about this. Now, the computer programmer sitting in the dark in his little mole hall, creating the website they use, he's thinking to himself, this is going to result in a phone call that we're going to have to deal with if I don't make this so intuitive and so easy. The accountant, who may be looking at different accounting software, is thinking to himself, how is this going to affect the end user experience? See, by training people throughout the whole thing, everyone understands how it all works together. But you know, that's not the end. There's also commander's intent. One of the things that Zappos preaches is to connect with the customer on the phone. Most call centers have a time limit, how long you need to spend on the phone to make a sale. Zappos doesn't do that. They had one actual phone call where a customer service rep spent 10 hours on the phone. 10 hours. Better be a darn good sale, don't you think? Like stock an entire shoe store?
Yeah, right.
One pair of Nike sneakers. But this person needed that connection. And the customer service rep knew that that's what their job was. And so they made that connection. And I've spoken to Christina Foley, a VP at Zappos, about this. Management wasn't happy. They didn't like that, but he didn't get in trouble. And in fact, because that story is out there in the ether, they've gotten more business from that than they could ever imagine. So what are you going to do as you leave here today? How are you going to give your teams the big picture? And when I say teams, it could be your children. You want them to clean their room? Let them understand how come that's important. It may not sink in the first time, but it'll sink in. When your team has to roll out a new product line or you need to make a change, give them the big picture, how it affects others, and what your intention for doing it is. And I promise you'll see a huge boost in productivity. Thank you. Join the Radical Accountability Movement. Watch the next video right here and subscribe so you never miss a tactical breakthrough with Locked On Leadership.